Peter Sweden here. Jews are not safe in Sweden anymore. Import Palestine, become Palestine. So Trump recently announced that Jerusalem would be the capital of Israel. And perhaps not unsurprisingly, some people in Sweden have gone completely bananas over this. So in just the last 2 days in Sweden, there's been some extremely worrying things happening. On Friday evening, some 200 Palestinians went out in the Swedish city of Malmo, out on the streets, calling for another intifada, and they also shouted, they were chanting, quote, shoot the Jews, unquote. Then the next day on Saturday, which was yesterday, migrants were out on the streets of Stockholm burning the Israeli flag. And then a little bit later, on Saturday night, the Jewish synagogue in Gothenburg was firebombed by some 10 to 20 gangs of masked youth. That's the term they always use in Swedish media for migrant gangs, criminal gangs. They always call them gangs of youth, but that's always these migrant gangs from the no-go zones in Sweden when they use that term. So they got several Molotov cocktails, lit them on fire and threw it at the synagogue in Gothenburg. Now luckily the firebombs didn't make it inside the synagogue, but it hit the outside of the building, so the grass and so on started to burn. And they were having some kind of party in the synagogue with the Jewish youths. So they were having a party inside, when all of a sudden these masked youths came and firebombed the building. Now reports show that they became terrified, obviously, and the Jews, they went and hid inside the basement because of the attack. Now the Swedish security services are looking into this, which means it could potentially be looked at as a terrorist attack. I mean, if you ask me, this really suits the definition of a terrorist attack. You have people attacking a certain group of other people to terrorize them because they don't like them. I mean, to me, this is a clear case of a terrorist attack that's happened in Sweden. Now the media obviously isn't reporting it as such because this is their beloved migrants that are behind this attack. Hold it guys, there's just been some breaking news from Sweden now, just as I was about to edit this video. There's been another petrol bomb attack against another Jewish congregation in Sweden. So in the Swedish city of Malmo, at the Jewish chapel there, 2 Molotov cocktails were thrown at it. Now this is the second attack against Jews in Sweden with petrol bombs in just 2 days, and this is in 2 different cities. I mean, this is insane. I mean, Sweden is literally, grenades, petrol bombs, shootings, rapes. I mean, Sweden is just in a catastrophic situation at this point. But I mean, they're particularly targeting Jews at the moment because of Trump's Jerusalem announcement. And I mean, this is insane. I mean, Sweden is beginning to resemble 30s Germany. I mean, Sweden with the far left government is now beginning to resemble the 30s Germany thanks to their migration policies. You know, this is almost like another Kristallnacht. You know, and the guys, actually the guys who were responsible for the attack in Gothenburg have been identified. One of them is 3 guys have been arrested for that. One of them is a Syrian, and the other 2 are apparently stateless, for what I've heard. Meanwhile, the mainstream media in Sweden, the fake news, dishonest media, they were speculating whether it was far-right extremists behind the attack. Yeah, no, that's fake news, dishonest reporting, guys. The mainstream media is not telling the truth. It was obviously not. I knew all along that these were the guys from no-go zone. I mean, it was confirmed. It was just confirmed today when one of the guys arrested was a Syrian. And the response from some journalists in Sweden have been absolutely appalling. They have taken this opportunity to warn against the hate against Muslims and warn about the nationalists, the Swedish Democrat Party, who are against mass migration. You know, the Swedish government you know, they've been trying to censor free speech, and people who have been criticizing mass migration online have been taken to court and sentenced for hate speech. You know, meanwhile the Swedish government is actually importing people who are doing actual hate crimes, literally terrorist attacks, firebombing other races of people, literally a hate crime. But no, we have to, if anyone criticizes our policy of mass migration, no, those are the guys that we have to put in prison. Yeah, that's the Swedish messed up logic. But again, going back to journalists, you know, in Sweden has been, you know, for people who live in Sweden, it's quite obvious, maybe not so much to people who don't speak Swedish, but, you know, a lot of Swedish journalists are extremely far left. And for whatever reason, they are quite, what shall you say, anti-Semitic. They don't like the state of Israel. They love Palestine and those things, but they seem to, for whatever reason, they hate the state of Israel. So it's not really surprising to see these far left journalists in the Swedish mainstream media kind of trying to ignore this attack that happened. You know, they can't really ignore it as too big news, but they're still trying to spin this in a ridiculous way, as I said before, this journalist that I mentioned. You know, it's just disgusting the way that the Swedish mainstream media has been handling this, and the Swedish government as well, because they have, you know, the Jewish organizations have actually for quite a few years now warned about anti-Semitism in Sweden. Now, and they are correct, there are people in Sweden, mainly people that the Swedish government has imported to Sweden, that are behind this. But meanwhile, the Swedish government, all they care about are these Swedish Nazis. You know, just a few months ago, the Swedish Nazi party wanted to march past the synagogue in Gothenburg. The media and the politicians were up in arms over it for days, so you wouldn't hear the end of it. Eventually, nothing happened at all. But now, when there's been an actual attack by these beloved Palestinians or migrants, they're kind of crickets. You know, the far left in Sweden has, you know, for a long time been very much against the state of Israel, and they love the Palestinians. Even though they all talk about, oh, they hate people who are anti-Semitic and so on. They hate speech and so on. But yet, when it comes to actual things like this, they really don't seem to care, unfortunately. So, you know, that's the irony. So here we're having Sweden in 2017. Palestinians are out on the streets, calling for another intifada, shouting that they want to physically harm Jews, burning the Israeli flag, actually firebombing a synagogue. This is all happening in Sweden in 2017. All thanks to the Swedish government's policy of mass migration. Or not necessarily mass migration as such, but they have been importing, what shall you say, the kind of people that hate Western way of life. You know, there are good migrants that love the Western way of life, but there are other migrants who want to destroy it. And the Swedish government, and I would say Europe as a whole, have kind of wanted to import the ones that hate the West, not the ones that like the West. You know, migrants who like the West, fine. But then you have the migrants who don't like the West and want to destroy it. They are kind of the ones that Europe have been importing, which makes no sense at all. Unless they're doing it deliberately or they're completely incompetent. Now, this isn't the only attack that has been happening in the Swedish city of Gothenburg the last few days. Now, this one in particular was targeted at Jews, but there has been quite a few other things happening in the Swedish city of Gothenburg too. From the 2nd of December until the 9th of December. So that is just 7 days, just 1 week in the Swedish city of Gothenburg alone. There has now been 2 hand grenade attacks, 2, 1 bomb attack, at least 1 shooting that I know of, at least 2 murder arsons, And now this firebomb attack against the Jewish synagogue. This is all in 1 week in the Swedish city of Gothenburg alone. I mean, what's going on in Sweden? Well, as I talked about before, there are these no-go zones in Sweden. In Gothenburg in particular, there are quite a few. And you have these criminal gangs, very often migrants, who run these areas. Now, I actually had a displeasure of coming face to face with one of these guys a couple of months ago in Gothenburg when I was there reporting on some protests that were going on. So basically you had this Antifa, and together with Antifa, these gangs from these no-go zones joined up with them and they attacked the police. Now I was there reporting on what was happening, and I got it all on video, so I have it all on my YouTube channel. Go and check those videos out, guys. You had some of these migrants from the no-go zones who actually, one of them actually had a sling, and he was using it to hurl rocks at the police with tremendous speed. I mean, these things are these things can be lethal. And at one instance, he actually threw the rock right over my head. And I got it all on video, it's on my YouTube channel, so go and check those videos out as well, guys. So he was using a sling, hurtling rocks at tremendous speed towards the police, and at one instance it just threw right over my head and hit the building behind me. And at that point actually the Gothenburgers, the citizens, actually became quite angry, upset at them, and actually went to attack these guys, the Antifa and the migrant gang. And it was actually a fight on the streets. I got all on video. Who was this guy, by the way? This guy was identified. Oh, and earlier on, before he used the sling, he was actually shouting Allahu Akbar towards the police. Him and his friends, they were shouting Allahu Akbar towards the police, together with Antifa. Antifa was together with these guys. The guy with the sling was later identified as a Somalian migrant that came to Sweden a couple of years ago, and he was actually part of the terrorist group Al-Shabaab in Somalia, where he was taught how to use weapons and make bombs. And this guy then came to Sweden as an asylum seeker, and he was actually refused asylum, if I remember correctly, earlier this year, I believe. But for whatever reason he got to stay. I think he appealed it. Oh yeah, that was the thing, yeah. He actually, after he was ordered to leave Sweden, he claimed he was under 18. He claimed he was 17 years old, so then all of a sudden he got to stay anyway. That's what happened. I remember now. I did a whole video on that. Go, if you want to see the whole story, go and check those videos out. It's on my YouTube channel as well. These are the, so this was in Gothenburg, so it might very well have been this guy or some of his friends that went and firebombed the Jewish synagogue yesterday. You know, just imagine these people are on the streets in Sweden thanks to the reckless migration policy that the Swedish government has had. And, you know, Jewish people are now living in fear in Sweden for attacks. And Swedish people too. You know, this is low-level domestic terrorism happening in Sweden. Swedish people are afraid, Jewish people are afraid, and the only people that aren't, well, and migrants are afraid too, because they are victims of this as well. Because I'm just really lost for words right now of how bad the situation really is in Sweden. It's worse than you think. And I mean, this guy, he was part of a terrorist group. Why on earth is he still in Sweden? I mean, the Swedish government, the court papers actually show that they knew about this. The Swedish government knew about this guy being part of this terrorist group, and yet he's still allowed to stay in Sweden. And then he goes on and attacks the Swedish police with sling, and he nearly hit me with a rocket that went just flying right over my head when I was there reporting. Why is this guy still in Sweden? He should have been he should have been deported a long time ago. Why is he still in Sweden? And now potentially it could have been him that did the attack against the Jewish people yesterday. I mean, this is Sweden 2017. A horrific attack against the Jewish synagogue. And there's been so many attacks, horrific attacks against Swedish people as well. This really has to stop. Well, thank you so much for watching, guys. Please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't done so, and make sure to hit the notification bell as well, so you get notifications whenever new videos come out. And share this video with all your friends on social media as well. because the mainstream media, they're not up to the job, they're not reporting on this as they should. So make sure to share this video all you can, guys, to help get the truth out there about what's happening in Sweden. And leave a comment below what you guys think, and if you want to support my work, it'd be much appreciated, because it takes it's not cheap to do independent journalism like I'm doing. So if you want to support my work at all, to help me going to keep producing content like this, please consider supporting me on PayPal or Patreon. I'll leave the links in the description below, and I'll see you guys later.